Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show. My name is Elle Russ, and I am a #1 best-selling author and master coach. My intention is to inspire, educate, and motivate you with weekly content featuring amazing guests and solo episodes. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about me, my courses, free masterclasses, partner discounts, and much more. Enjoy the show. Michelle Harris, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Elle. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
You know, everyone listening, you're going to love, you'll realize very quickly why I brought Michelle on. It's because she is doing everything that I love for women in leadership roles. That's your jam. Women leaders, more of that. Always. And, you know, I don't know how much you know about me, but, you know, with my work with confidence and people listening who know, career success kind of begins with leaders. Leadership is the foundation of major success. It's a critical factor in determining full potential. So let's hear your life story as to how you led up to your amazing company and courses, amazing stuff, thebosstrack.com, everybody. We'll put it in the show notes as well. Tell us a little bit about how did you get to this point? I love what you're doing. This is so, my mother would love you. I mean, my mother, those are like the OGs, right? Of like this kind of stuff. And so,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leadership is my jam as well. And that's why I'm here. My story is maybe a little bit of a non-interesting story. I started in leadership really early on in my career, and really even in college, I was president of the business organization on campus, and I don't really know what that stems from. I don't know if it's me being the oldest of all the kids in my family, or if it's because I had working parents and was alone a lot and read a lot. So learned a lot and probably developed a confidence in myself early on that came from myself, but probably from my mom as well. She really encouraged me to be the first one to go to college in my family, and she really boosted my confidence all along the way. So I would say that early on, like that's where my journey begins. I went through my normal career. I was in accounting and finance. 25 years of leadership. And as I came up as a leader, I struggled to find resources to help me figure things out. Like luckily I was resourceful in finding the right books to read. The internet was just early on in my early leadership career. So finding forums that I could be part of, but it was really hard to find resources that could help answer the questions that I have. And when I was coming up, of course, and it still is, I mean, leadership is very male dominated, and trying to get the support or mentorship that I was looking for was just really, really hard. And I mean, on top of that, I was a single parent trying to manage that on top of being that leader. And I don't know, in my career, I really started to love building teams and building people, like helping people in their careers and providing them the mentorship that I never got. And for everybody in my teams, we would have individual development plans. I would work to grow my teams from the ground up. If I brought them in as an associate or low level staff, I would look at their potential and say, where am I going to have this person in 5 years? Where am I going to have this person in 10 years? And look at the longer term and work with them to grow into those positions. If that's what they ultimately wanted. Things, of course, change along the way. And and building teams. And that's what I became known for in my career. I was brought into companies. I primarily worked for companies that were private equity backed, at high acquisition mode, high growth mode. So we're continuously building teams and growing teams. So when I decided to leave after really 25 plus years in in corporate America, I spent some time thinking about, well, it's time for me to do something independently and not go to a next, VP or CFO role. What does that look like, and what do I want that to be? And again, going back to me, my personal story of having a hard time finding mentorship, finding the resources, having that community. And even when I was leading my teams and trying to find resources for my team, it was really hard to find a resource for new leaders without sending them to like a 1-day program or a 2-day program and then coming back and being left on their own. Well, of course, with my support, but being left to implement and not having that follow up. So really, Boss Track was what we had in mind when we started it was we would have an 8-week program that would take them through the different skills and the shift in mindset that you need to have when going from individual contributor to a leader. And we have coaches for each week, and they get coaching. And then after that 8-week program, we have an online community that they roll into, and we have group coaching calls every month, and they have resources online that they can ask questions. So that's kind of how we started. And then we kind of rolled into opening up the community to everyone this year. So really anyone can join the community and has that resource of finding the mentor, asking questions, and not only myself answering, but we have probably 20 to 25 experienced women leaders online that are there to answer questions as well from their experience. So I don't know if that maybe went into a little too much, with what you were asking, but that's basically the story.
No, I love that you have this program for new leaders. It is like, where do you go to find, like, who do you call?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't have anyone in your family that was one, right, or friends, then, yes, this is like an amazing community. And I imagine as a result of the just like community, just igniting confidence and self-esteem in this arena.
Yes, definitely. That is actually we have a week solely dedicated to confidence, having the confidence to lead and what that looks like and how to build that. So, and I've watched your mastermind and looking forward to reading your book on your masterclass. Yes. On confidence. So, that's the basis. That's the basis for leading, is having that confidence.
I just kind of spitball around with a few things. I'm just thinking of a couple things off the bat, about leaders. That's important. How leadership can help people achieve goals, right? And then you go, okay, yeah, we all get it. You're a leader, so then you're up and you're a leader. Nah, it's like defining a thing by defining a thing. And if you break it down and look at things like strategic thinking, effective, what's that? Okay, effective planning, right? Executing projects, self-awareness, because this would enable one or anyone in any profession, right? But enable you to take a left turn if you have to, how you can contribute better, what your weaknesses are, areas for improvement. So self-awareness is really important. I mean, a lot of this is mindset. And I would love to hear more about some of these other things and like why leadership can help you achieve professional goals.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. It's it's not just, okay, I was promoted to a supervisor role or I was promoted to a manager role. You can be a leader in so many different ways. And, one of the things you have to realize is, especially in corporate America, is that you can't do everything. You have to work with others to get things done. And leadership is all about having influence over with other people in the organization, outside the organization. And how do you do that? And how do you, one, build the trust with those other people to feel confident in you, but also how do you understand who you are, how you work with others? Back to what you said, having that self-awareness to know what your your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and how to fill that in with other resources as well. So there's so much to really say there. But yeah, leadership is not just being that person who has that team. It can mean I'm a project manager, I'm leading a project, and I have to have influence over those people. And what does that look like?
I think another thing I just thought of that's important that you exude through even just the listeners hearing you, which would be, I doubt anyone, not that you have never in life, but you have a demeanor such that I hear you and I go, this is someone that has emotional intelligence, someone who's equipped, who's not going to be blowing up at employees, who's calm, cool, collected, diplomatic. So emotional intelligence is also a really important factor because you have to manage your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
those of others. And I think everyone listening has probably worked with a fucking nightmare person who just, is moody or comes in or whatever it is. And, we had this where this person was probably the biggest earner for the company at the time. I used to be a tech recruiter and an account manager. And my partner, this was my partner at the time, and she'd come in to she smashed her Porsche on the way into work and came in and like threw a water bottle across the office and be like, fuck, and kind of got away with murder because she made so much money for the company. Then we were a small company then it grew. And then suddenly people were complaining. And I just remember being like, oh, she's going down. And she did. She eventually went down.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where, it was so toxic, right? Because people were like, oh, Elle, you're so good. Like, how do you deal with her or whatever? Right. And I was like, because she doesn't do it to me. I mean, because of probably my confidence on my level, I was like, oh no, she's not. It was never at me. But, watching it was still painful. It still was like, you can't bottle that up. I was being abused by watching her being abusive. And she eventually, listen, that only goes so far for so long until it's going to catch up with you. But that is a perfect example of like, oh my gosh, being able to control one's own emotions as well and recognize those of others. So I'd love you to expand on emotional intelligence and leadership.
Yeah, that's actually one of our pillars that we teach in we cover in the 8-week program, because I think it's essential to leadership, even for new leaders. One of the surprisingly some of the pushback that I received when we developed this program was maybe emotional intelligence is a little too advanced for new leaders, and I was like, if anything, I think that's maybe the first thing we need to teach.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand that, but yeah, again, emotional intelligence is, yes, it's understanding yourself, understanding others, where they're coming from, being able to put yourself in their shoes, and of course, using the word empathize with them, not sympathize with them. I mean, Brene Brown does a great job in explaining all this, but yeah, knowing where they're coming from, so you can address really the situation or know how to move forward with them in a certain, if you're having a conflict or if they're not understanding something or they're having issues. But it's also being socially aware. And it gets back to that. How are you going to interact with people? Are you going to come in and bring everybody together and, say, hey, how are you doing today? Or are you going to come in and throw that stapler across the room because you want to show that you are the dominant person? I've had my share of those people that I worked for. And you're right. I mean, that is, if you kind of know, you build, and that's another thing. Emotional intelligence, you can learn and you can build emotional intelligence. It's not something that you are born. I mean, you might be born with it, but you can learn and develop that skill. But yeah, it's something that I think I was one of those lucky ones to be born with it, or maybe it was all those books that I read when I was in my early teens to pass the time. But I was reading so many self-development books when I was like 11 and 12. So maybe that's where it comes from. But
Probably
yeah,
helpful. Hey, everyone, you got kids out there? Throw them some.
yeah, yeah. Give them
That
some,
11-year-old in a cabin for a week with a fucking self-help book and see what happens.
give them some Tony Robbins. See how they do. But yeah, and you're right. It's so interesting that you kind of read that so quickly. But that is something that I've worked for executives who are the ones that throwing the staplers or throwing the pencil at somebody's head. And I've gone into rooms with other people where they're just like shaking the whole time because they're so nervous to be in the same room with that person. And it's really understanding myself and how I want to be and interact with this person, and really understanding that person as well, and understanding the situation. And that's really what emotional intelligence is all about.
What else is something to consider if someone's listening and they're like, I want to be a leader, like I want to be, I want to be that person, like I want that. How do I go about it? I mean, of course, yes, please take her courses and all of that stuff, but what are some questions they could ask themselves first, maybe to determine some things that they're willing to do, or characteristics they may or may not need to develop? What can someone be thinking about right now as they're listening, going, I want to be a leader. How do I simmer in my head about this and kind of move forward to think this is possible for me?
Well, I think one of the biggest things for me is, you have to step back and think about whether you want to be responsible. So I'm going to talk about leadership in the sense that you have a team of 5 to 10 people or more. Do you want to be in a situation where you are leading and guiding other people and allowing them to be responsible for producing the results, and letting go, being their coach, and letting go of your day-to-day responsibilities, because that's one of the hardest things that leaders have when moving into a leadership role, is they have a hard time with delegation and communication, and being able to be very open with their communication, whether it's good communication or perceived bad communication. So really sitting back and thinking about what that situation looks like. Can I give up control of actual getting the work done, rely on my team, guide my team, coach them, give them the feedback they need to get work done through others? Because really, it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And can I change my perspective to think about others and not as much about myself?
I'd love to hear some leadership success stories, people you've worked with, or just interesting stories. Actually, like, I'd love to, for fun, what's one of the most disastrous situations you've witnessed yourself in your line of work all these years? Not necessarily with the coaching and stuff. I mean like in the world of being a leader.
Yeah, I would say probably the most disastrous thing, is not being true to, you have to decide what your ethics are and what you will tolerate in your career, and what you won't, because business is business, and sometimes there can be some blurry lines and what is right and what's not right. And if things have been done a certain way, although not right way, some people will say it's okay to continue to do that, or there's always excuses, and there's always ways to kind of cross that line. So really being a leader, you have to personally know that for yourself. And when you're confronted with something, and I'm not saying confronted with, okay, I don't want to do that work. I mean, that is going to come up. But if it's something that you don't believe is I'm going to just use the word ethical, then that you need to address it with somebody in the company, or you need to kind of decide, is this where I want to be? Because that's it's definitely, I've actually been in that
That
situation
is the disaster
a couple of
conundrum. Yeah.
times. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had to make some tough decisions in my career and moving on, or even addressing situations with legal counsel, and unfortunately, kicking off procedures and a whole situation of SEC investigations and restatements. But you have to have that building that confidence, and that confidence in yourself to know what's right and what's wrong,
Yes.
and speak up when it's time to speak up.
On the other side of that, what is one of the most, like the biggest wins, one of the most incredible, fun, wonderful things that happened or that you experienced as a leader yourself that you were just so proud of, or that just really still satisfying to this day?
Oh, there's so many. There's so many. I I'm so proud of the teams that I've built, and bringing somebody in and seeing them progress, and really seeing those people want to succeed and do the things that they need to do to grow, and then ultimately seeing them move into a management role and succeed and be confident in themselves. And that always brought me joy. I love team building exercises. I have to say, like, the most fun thing that I'm actually proud of looking back is I had a team where we had quarterly team meetings, and we always had a team building exercise. And this one we had was our annual offsite meeting, and the our team building exercise was to get together with somebody else on our team. And it was actually, I had multiple teams under me, so they couldn't work with one of their coworkers. It had to be somebody in another department, and write a song and perform perform that song at our offsite meeting. And everybody did it. I mean, looking back, I can't believe that somebody didn't complain, or, there's somebody didn't opt out, but everybody did it and was so creative, and we had such a good
Nice.
time. It was, I know that's a little thing, but it is, it's great when you've built a team that can give themselves up to having fun, and trusting everybody around them to have that joy and confidence in them.
What are a few tips, or I'd love to hear some stories about, well, I guess leadership can be management, but let's just talk about management for a second. It's a one level of leadership. What are some effective management situations you've seen, and contrast it maybe with something that wasn't, or take a situation that you were confronted with, not necessarily yourself, that you could have witnessed or coached on, where someone made the wrong move, and then what would you have done? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've seen go wrong is when somebody is not willing to be open with their communication. So if I might have had a director or a manager working for me who was not confident in their abilities and their abilities to give feedback, and felt like any negative feedback was just going to hurt the situation, cause that person to disconnect from their role, and have them look at my director as somebody that they didn't want to work for anymore. I mean, I'm simplifying that, but yeah, so that was a coaching moment for me to have with them, to really explain to them that they're not doing that person any favors in their career, that they needed to be open and honest about what that person was doing wrong. Because one, if they're going to move forward in their career, they need to know the right way to do something, the right way to handle something. Two, that if that person is 1 or 2 years in and still doing the wrong thing, they're not going to look at their director as having their back as their leader. And three, the worst thing is that when you have a team and that team sees that you are not addressing a situation, then you lose the trust and confidence in the rest of your team. And then all of a sudden you have this uninspired, unmotivated team that's not willing or, wanting to, not necessarily do the work because, that you have professionals on your team, but go above and beyond or, act as a cohesive, highly effective team. So I think that the biggest thing that I've seen that I've given coaching about is being able to give that feedback in a positive way and understanding why giving that difficult feedback is actually a positive situation and for everybody involved.
I had a client who had this several times, maybe 3 or 4 times, that had an employee that, and this was a very awkward one because the employee was just like in the meetings, just like talking too much about personal life or just babbling on, like making things go longer and just being like excessive with commentary and things where they're like, they're a nice person, but and so it's hard because you're kind of like saying, hey, your personality sucks a little bit. Like that's kind of what, it could be taken as, right?
Yeah.
And that's a tough one versus something that's very clear, like, hey, you used a word you shouldn't probably, or like something very clear cut. And so I just remember and this client happened to be just really great, a really effective communicator, the kid gloves that it takes, the prefacing that it takes in order to introduce a conversation like that as well. And I remember even hearing my mentor, Mark Sisson, talking to someone on the phone one time. And the conversation that he started was very positive, like, oh, hey. And like, hey, and he said, hey, you know what? I want to tell you, you know how I feel about you. Like you're incredible, you're great, you're this, like a lot of positives. And then said, but I kind of got a little bit of a bone to pick with you here. And and then introduce the thing. And I remember being like, oh, I like that opener. That was the right way to roll into that one. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, but sometimes the feedback can be about things that aren't so clear cut. They're really just like, hey, you're annoying everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And we call that the feedback sandwich, where you come in with something like, oh, I really like how you did X. But I just wanted to kind of tell you that maybe you could have approached Y a little differently, and here's why. And then kind of following up with, something positive or, coming to kind of what is the next step and like stepping away with a positive outcome from that feedback. So yeah, that's it's definitely a good way to give the feedback. And first is even having, I guess, we keep coming back to the word confidence, but first is even having the confidence to go into that conversation, but then kind of having a plan for how to give it so it's taken in the best way.
Yeah, I'll just repeat something like I've said in my book, and I say it all the time, but you'll be right on board with it. You've probably said it in other ways in your life, which is, I don't know. I mean, confidence is essential. You can develop it, right? But it is so important for being able to speak up. And I guess what I'm saying is, when you speak up and it's a moment that's awkward to speak up, it's like, it's not going to be fun, right? It's still in. Okay, I'm choking up on my words here. I want to find the best way to roll this out. I'm not so confidently expressing myself right now. No. To be able to, it doesn't have to always be contentious. There's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking up, declaring a boundary, asking for, saying negative feedback doesn't have to be done in a contentious way. And I think when people are not confident and need to develop it. That's their biggest worry, that any kind of speaking up-ish thing that they do has to be, like they're walking on eggshells. I afraid I don't want to hurt any, that kind of, it's such a resistant-y vibe. It's so not forward thinking of just like, hey, why it could be a throwaway too. I mean, half of the things with my confidence coaching with people, with turning something around in the way that they need to speak up about something, it's for like a different tone and presentation. And it's just like, then they never heard it that way before, because in their head, it was going to be contentious.
Yeah.
Took me a long time to get there. Sorry about that, everyone. I don't know. I need some coffee this afternoon.
No, you're exactly right. It does not need to be contentious. Like if you have feedback to give, you can do it in a positive way. And that goes back to the emotional intelligence that we were talking about. Like, you need to kind of understand where you're coming from, understand how they're going to take it, and how you can give the feedback so that the outcome of the conversation will be positive. And there are so many ways to do that. And it's really knowing that person and how you need to maybe color the conversation a little bit so that they will so they know that your intent in having that talk is positive.
What else would you like our audience to know about leadership? Some examples, some stories, anything that will shed light on this topic?
Yeah, I think like we haven't really talked about it a whole lot, but when you do have a team, again, it's no longer about you, it's about your team. So you need to give yourself up to knowing that. And to do that, the step one is to build trust with your team. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, especially when you're stepping into a role at a new company where nobody knows you. And there are, a lot of different things that you can do to start building that trust. The first thing is really getting to know everybody, and not only from a work perspective, but also from a people perspective. So you have to go in wanting to know more about them. Who do they have a family? What is important to them? Do they have kids? Do they have pets that they love? So, and you need to remember what they tell you, and you need to, when you associate with them,
instead of like, hey, how's your husband Joe? They're like, I don't have a husband and her name is Jan.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that is really the first step, is getting to know your team. And another thing is making sure that you are respecting boundaries. And that, especially in today's world, is so important. And that's part of getting to know them too. Like, what are their boundaries? Do they have a hard deadline at 5:00 because they have to go to pick their kids up from daycare? And being respectful of those boundaries, because once you start pushing people outside of that. So you're, requiring somebody to be in a meeting from 5 to 6, knowing that they have kids to pick up. You're going to lose their trust and their respect pretty quickly. And, they might not leave, but you might not get the best performance from them. And it's going to affect your whole team. So I think that in itself is, really, really important. And yeah, I would say that. And also, I would say that communicating, you're communicating in a different way as a leader as well. You're not only you're not only having to communicate with your peers and your team, but you're communicating with your leadership in a different way, because you're now responsible for a team, and being able to understand how they want their updates, what updates they want, what are the priorities, what priorities do I need to push down, what are the goals of the company, to know what priorities need to be set, and how do I keep my team on track. So it's not not an individual contributor anymore, you're suddenly in that middle, you're in that middle ground where you're making sure things are happening and, in a delicate way without micromanaging. And so I would say communication and priorities is also important. And that's actually interesting. We've been getting a lot of questions lately about micromanaging, which I'm actually been very happy to get, because I don't think a lot of people in the past, or a lot of people don't recognize when they're micromanaging. And I don't know if they're getting feedback from people on their team that they are micromanaging, or if they sense that they are. So we've been getting a lot of questions.
Oh, I just want to I hate that, but I just want to pipe in on that. By the way, I have been so lucky in my life because I have been like the opposite of micromanaged, completely trusted. And it is so nice. Now, I don't know, maybe it would be anxiety ridden if you didn't feel competent in yourself. I can see that. But for someone like me, just let me do my thing. Thank you. And just in trusting me, checking in every now and then. Very minimal feedback other than positive, like really great experiences. And it's really nice. And I've, coached people and I've heard experiences too from friends of and seen micromanagement. It's really oppressive. And it's really the manager person just not being able to let go. They're just an uncoached alpha who can't delegate, right? Or is not hiring the right people to trust. You also have to hire the right people. I saw one client's father has like a really big, multi-level corporation, but like there's always turnover and people are always like stealing from them. And it's because he just goes for like the cheapest possible salary you could offer a person in the world. And he never learns the fucking lesson. My client who's the son is always like, Dad, like, are you not seeing a pattern here over the years, right? You get what you pay for. Yeah. And also, you're micromanage. He's a micromanager,
Yeah. And I would say the biggest thing you can do there is, besides recognizing it and getting out of your own way, is just making sure you have, I call them agreements with everybody on your team. And those agreements include, okay, what is that person responsible for? When are the due dates for certain things? When am I going to check in on them? Or when am I available for them to check in? And then kind of letting them do their thing. And when you have your check-ins, then you know how things are going. And if you built trust with your team, then they're going to communicate with you when something does go wrong, or if they need help with something. So it's all a big circle. But having those agreements in place where everybody knows exactly what to expect can really help with trying to move past micromanaging. But yeah, definitely having the right people on your team, because if you're micromanaging because that person continues to do something wrong and you feel like you have to watch over them, then either they need training and you need to recognize that and give them that training, or maybe they're not the right person for that role and you need to find something different for them, or coach them out of the organization, unfortunately.
Yeah. And if you are one of those like non-delegator micromanagers, are you subconsciously pulling in the wrong people so that you can micromanage? You know what I mean?
Yes, that's true.
I mean, everything's kind of a little bit of something of yourself, right? So, okay, so everyone can go to thebosstrack.com to learn all about, you have so many courses, so many little like mini kind of courses, like, hey, here's just a little bit here on this one. You can kind of pick and choose, and then there's combinations. It's wonderful. Anything you'd like to leave with our audience?
No, I would say definitely check us out. We have our community. We do have a free community membership where you get the benefits of being able to ask questions online and get feedback. We're just starting it and building it. So we're starting to really see a boost in activity, and I'm hoping to kind of grow that. But yeah, just find that way to develop that confidence in yourself and, definitely check out Elle and everything that she teaches in confidence, because as you kind of saw from our conversation here, a lot of it comes back to that confidence, that having the empathy and having the confidence, and you've got a good basis for great leadership.
Love it. Thank you so much. And everyone else, we'll see you next week. Hey listeners, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.